And in the Impact segment tonight, as we reported last night, Saturday's big civil rights event in Washington was long on grievance, short on problem solving. You can see my talking points memo from last night on BillO'Reilly.com. But there is some good news. A number of black Americans are starting to question why the civil rights establishment is avoiding the key issues on crime and the collapse of the traditional family. Writing in USA Today, columnist Wayne Wickman made that point. And yesterday, the president of the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, Bob Woodson, was also critical of the civil rights industry. Mr. Woodson joins us now from Washington. So, as you know, we've been reporting on this for about a month, and I believe it's the collapse of the traditional African-American family that's leading to the violence, the bad education, chaos in general. Am I wrong?
No, you're right, Bill, but there has always been a great divide in the black community over this issue. Unfortunately, the civil rights movement, of which I was a part in the 60s, has declined and morphed into a race grievance industry. And was Booker T. Washington at the turn of the century said there are groups of blacks who thrives off the grievance of their fellow blacks. If blacks lose their grievance, they lose their income. And unfortunately, that's what we have today.
Now, do you believe that extends all the way down to the folks, or is it just centered in the hot? Look, we established last night very, very vividly, and nobody has challenged it, that last Saturday's march in Washington was funded by the teachers' unions very heavily, and that the money went into organizations like Al Sharpton's Action Committee and other civil rights concerns, and there's big money involved. But do the rank and file African-American folks, in your opinion, want the government money to continue to flow and therefore get behind the grievance industry?
As I said, Bill, in 1965, Bill Raspberry was a banner headline on the front page of the Washington Post, and it said, "Poor Negroes are not benefiting from the gains of the civil rights movement." And so even from back then till today, the interest of the so-called leadership has often been at odds with the rank and file. And this is true on this issue. If you would take polls, for instance, most low-income blacks support vouchers for education. The civil rights leadership opposes it. In Cincinnati, Ohio, for instance, Sharpton and others came in when a white police officer shot a black youngster, and as a consequence, they boycotted the city. Well, the police then, it resulted in police nullification. So the police said, if I'm going to be accused of a racist, then I won't patrol in the black communities. The murder rate went up 800%, Bill, in 1 year. But it wasn't the sons and daughters of those leaders whose children were in those neighborhoods. And the same thing is occurring in New York, where stop and frisk is threatened, which means that if they are successful, you'll see a tick in the murder rate. But the folks
here in New York that live in the black neighborhoods that are affected by stop and frisk the most don't want it. All the polls show that. They're supporting the liberal candidates that are going to throw it out. And that's my question. See, nothing's going to get better. I'm giving up on the civil rights industry. There's too much money, and they're not going to come around and look out and try to solve any problems. They're just not. They're going to blame everything on the white establishment, as they always have. But I'm trying to rally the regular African-American people to say, look, you guys got to get to the nub of the problem. The collapse of the family is where it is all about. You can't have a good education if there's no emphasis on that in the family. If you're going to have 75% out of wedlock births, you're going to have chaos and poverty everywhere. Get behind it. Start to get the peer pressure. Right. Working against that, but it's not happening.
But Bill, there are solutions to the problem. For instance, what we do at the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise and other groups are going into those neighborhoods and visiting those families, the 30% of the families that are raising children that are not dropping out of school or in jail and drugs, and we are finding out what is it that is happening in those households that causing people in toxic neighborhoods to raise children successfully. And what we're doing is demonstrating when you invest in those neighborhood leaders and then take steps to help what they do to inspire others to change, That's what we have to have solution conferences and bring people together around these remedies.
But you're at loggerheads with the civil rights industry and the liberal white establishment that says we don't want to hear any of that. It's all about big government pouring more and more money into the precincts, and that hasn't worked. Poverty rate is now higher than it was 50 years ago when the war on poverty started, and it's not working.
It really does, Bill, but I still think that we have demonstrated that in the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for instance, is at a 25-year low in violence because of the initiatives that we are taking.
It can work, but the word has got to get out. Mr. Woodson, thanks very much. We appreciate it, and here is the result of our BillO'Reilly.com.